Shalom, I want to undertake on the topic of Parshat Vaetchanan, the whole question of self-esteem, self-respect, and the issue of Jewish corporate responsibility. In Parshat Vaetchanan, we have the Ten Commandments, we have the Shema and the V'ahavta, you shall love the Lord your God. We also have Moses pleading for another chance to be able to go into the Promised Land after God said no and God turns him down. But we also have Moses in the book of Deuteronomy giving these speeches exhorting the people to follow God's will and saying that someday you're going to become corrupt, you have to return to God. In this parsha, we also have a rephrase of what occurs earlier in the Torah, where the Jewish people are called a Am Segulah, a nation of a treasured nation to God, and Am Kadosh, a holy nation to God. Now, the reason why I bring this up is a couple of questions. One is that I always thought it was completely phony and ridiculous to have the self-esteem movement to tell kids you're great. Now, as a member of the human race, a member of a human being, human beings have essential divine dignity. We're made in God's image, and therefore every human being deserves respect. But to tell somebody, forgetting anything they've ever done or who they are, that they should have self-esteem based on nothing is a crock, because it doesn't work. It's filling up on empty calories that'll just give them a temporary high, maybe, like white refined sugar, and then it'll bring them low. It has to be built on something. What does it have to be built on? Well, self-esteem has to be built on not self-esteem, but on self-respect. And how do you earn self-respect? By following God's way, by self-control. It says in the Talmud, who is a gibor, who's a hero, who's a strong man, someone who controls his inclinations. Who's rich, somebody who's satisfied with his portion. Who is honored, the one who honors others. Who's wise, the one who learns from everyone. Self-reliance. You have to learn in the world that you have to be reliant on yourself. It's the old joke about the guy who drowns and is complaining to God about, I was a faithful servant to you, how could you let me drown in that flood? And God said, I first sent the boat and you turned it down. And then when the water got higher, I sent a helicopter and you were on the roof and you turned it down. You thought I'd save you without being self-reliant. Not going to happen. And so self-esteem is based on self-respect, self-reliance, self-control. Then you get self-esteem. But what happens when you make mistakes? Well, the beautiful thing about it is that you can always repent. In fact, in this portion, Vaetchanan, it uses the word Vashavta. You should repent, you should return several times. And in the corporate sense, we have this portion following Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the Jewish year. Interesting that the Sabbath after Tisha B'Av, the day in which we mourn the destruction of the holy temples and the expulsion of Jews from Spain, we call it Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of comfort, after the opening words of the prophet Isaiah, quoted in the Haftorah on the Shabbat, whereas Isaiah says, be comforted, my people. To use a couple of sports analogies, Ron Artest, who is a great basketball player, said the following, and he was gazing at his rookie card. He said, that guy was dumb. So it's interesting to be able to look back and say, I was dumb when I was younger, I made some big mistakes, and I've repented. And the sad story of Diana Taurasi, I think her name is, one of the great female basketball stars, who was caught 3 drunk driving charges, including one of extreme DUI. And hopefully she has learned her lesson. And anyway, it said in an article in Sports Illustrated, she said, I've done a lot of good in my life. This thing is not going to define me. And that's important to understand for an individual. So we understand that self-esteem, empty, without based on anything, will ultimately not be productive. But self-esteem that's based on achievement, on self-reliance, on self-respect, on self-control, that will lead to self-esteem. But as a member of the Jewish people, it's funny, Jews take credit for all the good stuff Jews do. I love getting emails from people telling me how many Nobel scientists Jews have, and whenever Jews does something good, Jews, every other Jew takes personal credit. But then, of course, it's the other side of it too. When you got Madoff, the worst embezzler in human history, Ponzi scheme, $50 billion. Then you have these 5 Syrian Orthodox rabbis in New Jersey during July of 2009 being convicted of money laundering. You can't say, well, that's not me. The article in New York Magazine talked about this notion of Jewish exceptionalism and says, we can't have it both ways. The fact is Jews are exceptional. There's no debate about that. But Madoff was trusted by Jews precisely because he was Jewish. And the Ashkenazi organ broker was willing to hear out Syrian Sephardic Jews precisely because there was a yarmulke on his head. We have to take that too. And so Jews don't get credit for the achievement of other Jews, just like Jews shouldn't get blamed for the bad behavior of other Jews. The idea that God said we're an Am Segula, a treasured nation, an Am Kadosh, a holy set-apart nation, is the corporate Jewish entity. But individual Jews, again, self-esteem based on the fact that I'm a Jew, what good does that do? It has to be self-esteem based on my contributions to the Jewish people and my contributions to God. And when I make a mistake, make tshuva. But it all has to be on what can you do to make the world a better place. And what can you do to make the world a holier place? That is really the key issue. I'll tell you one final story that was in Sports Illustrated in July 2009. Linebacker Ryan Nece, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. There's an article about not his football playing, but about called a charitable chain reaction. He says, we tend to think that as individuals we can't make that big a difference. But we can. One act can lead to another, both in the negative and the positive. And so it's interesting that this portion occurs with the Ten Commandments, where we are told that we shouldn't covet, we shouldn't steal, we shouldn't commit murder, we shouldn't be immoral sexually, we shouldn't bear false witness, but we should have a foundational belief in God, not have other gods, not take God's name in vain, observe the Sabbath, to remember that we are not the creators of the universe, to honor our parents, to learn the basic rules of respect to another human being, the people that gave us birth. That is the way and the direction to real self-esteem. Shalom.